Romance tropes are all the rage in animation, to the point where certain shows base a large amount of their appeal on said trope. But underneath the enemies to lovers or love triangles, there's a trope that is used often but rarely singled out to discuss. In fact, it is within Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Jimmy Neutron, Turning Red, The Loud House, Gravity Falls, and Phineas and Ferb. If you've seen any of these, then you've been introduced to this dynamic before. One of my first introductions to it is within the 2000s Cartoon Network show Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, specifically the episode Frankie My Dear, in which Mac covers for Frankie's task of doing paperwork, leading into her appreciation for doing so.
Mac, you're the best!
This is the beginning of Mac's crush on Frankie, which is explored heavily in 2 more episodes, but there's something important established within this episode. While Mac retains his infatuation for Frankie even towards the end of this episode, Frankie is completely oblivious to it. This first type of crush is what I'll call the one-way unknowing precautious crush, and it's the only one I have strong memories of seeing. What exactly was the dynamic between these two? For one, it was clear that Frankie's obliviousness was due to her seeing said kiss as a friendly gesture, among in this episode being busy with other people. Mac, who may have liked Frankie prior to this episode, just misinterprets the gesture to mean something more, leading into a series of wacky events involving Blue, the pizza guy, and this Prince Charming-esque imaginary friend, including one of my favorite scenes of the show. Mac and Blue are chasing the pizza guy away from Frankie, but when Blue lets out that the reason they're doing it in the first place is because Frankie likes the pizza guy, it's like he's on God mode, because now he's unbothered to the max.
No! Now look what you've done! Ah! Why is he coming back? Shut up and throw! 35, 40, 45, 50, and $2 for...
This scene is giving me the same energy of that guy who puts his all into punching the car door but can't get it to break. This is like when you try to punch obsidian in Minecraft with your bare hands. Getting back to this, how did this crush progress? Within the second episode to explore this, Ticket to Rod, Frankie wins tickets to see a movie about Rod Tango, who's like the action star of Foster's Home, and offers to take Mac as well. While it doesn't really explore what they're up to so much as it explores Blue interrupting them hanging out, a very important aspect is established here. Mac's idea of a good time with Frankie is just helping her out with chores and laughing at bad movies. When Frankie realizes that she can't go to the Rod Tango movie, she relinquishes the tickets to Mac, who confirms that it was never about the movies, but about spending time with Frankie.
I don't even want to go. How about I stay and help you and then maybe we can watch TV or something?
Great! It's a date.
Will there be popcorn?
Sure.
Within this episode, we see that Mac's infatuation with Frankie is pretty much platonic, with the exception of a kiss on the cheek here and there, and I think that's why it works. While the crush isn't necessarily a joke, but rather a running theme, they would never address it in this episode. However, they would address it in this final episode, but with a twist. Bad Dare Day. It's an episode revolving around daring people to do things outside of their comfort zone, as that's what makes dares entertaining to watch. What would be incredibly out of Mac's comfort zone?
Mac and Frankie, he loves Frankie. He'll never be able to do that one. Blue!
I accept.
As he discusses his very much real crush on Frankie, who seems to be very taken aback by the gesture, it is only when she hears the giggling of everyone behind Mac's back that she assumes that Mac was put up to it, which is true, but doesn't necessarily make what he said have any less weight, despite even him saying so. From this point on in the episode, Mac is a completely different person, confident in his abilities and only going to the finals to get revenge on Blue, who pushed him to say what he did to Frankie. In an attempt to hurt Blue, he targets his love for paddle balls, making him burn them all. As their dares reach a height where it's now just about making the other person look worse, they finally speak through their feelings about the situation.
Well, that probably would have never happened if I didn't make my best friend in the whole world reveal his biggest secret in front of everyone to have him laughed at while breaking his heart into 1,000 pieces.
Wow, I'm so sorry, Mac. I mean, Blue?
As heartwarming as this is, the episode would end with Blue stating that everyone knew about the crush already, except presumably Frankie. Frankie never took Mac's flustered reactions to mean anything grander, but what would this dynamic look like if the other person actually did take the younger person seriously? The writing of romance in Jimmy Neutron was never a selling point of the show. However, it has both very dated depictions of young romance, but also pairings that actually made a lot of sense, both of which I talked about in previous videos. The most memeable lovable one was always Carl and Jimmy's mother, Judy Neutron. This dynamic was short and in the background, however there was one episode that covered it quite extensively. Within Love Potion 9.76/J, Jimmy, in an attempt to stop developing romantic feelings, isolates the pheromone that causes, quote, boys to like girls.
What's a pheromone?
It's the chemical hormone that makes boys like girls. One whiff of this stuff will make a guy fall in love with the first girl he sees.
Good thing he didn't try to find the pheromone that makes girls like girls or boys like boys, because that didn't exist in the 2000s. This is very scientifically accurate. Carl accidentally opens a vent, leading into each of them falling in love with the first person they see, which for Jimmy and Sheen are predictably Cindy and Libby respectively. But for Carl, it's Jimmy's mother, Judy Neutron. What makes this dynamic funny? For one, the contrast between the two in terms of how they handled this news is the funniest part. Judy is incredibly freaked out and uncomfortable, but always manages to stay in control of the situation. The episode makes it clear that Judy has no problem shutting Carl down, but does care about Carl's feelings in a way to not just drop it on him immediately. There's also the newly made dynamic between Jimmy's father and Judy's husband, Hugh Neutron, and Carl, as Carl is aware that Judy and Hugh are married.
What we have is beautiful and you can't destroy it!
Alrighty then.
To say that Hugh is unbothered is an understatement. Unlike Foster's, where the dynamic was shown to have serious weight in terms of how Blue uses it against Mac, but also how Mac and Blue view Frankie, this show's tone makes it clear that this is clearly wrong and comedically just a very light situation. You're not meant to take this seriously. Carl bonds over Judy's cooking, to which Carl does naturally love food, just an observation confirmed within the show, but because we know that there's a pheromone potion, we know that this dynamic was forced and not developed over a period of time to matter. Again, unlike Frankie and Mac, Judy is aware of Carl's romantic interests and tries to speak about it with him.
Carl, Mr. Neutron and I... See, sometimes people like to have private time. Just the two of them.
Yeah, gotcha. How do we get rid of the dead wood?
Although she never explicitly shuts it down, it is heavily implied that she would have if they had more time and if Hugh wasn't being beaten senseless by a monkey. A monkey that Carl sent so that he can have this private time with Judy. Also, on a smaller note, Jimmy seems equally as unbothered when hearing the news of Carl and Judy, which also makes it being tied to the potion make more sense, because Jimmy would be aware that without said potion, Carl wouldn't have acted that way. However, what if there were huge consequences for someone who had said crush? May is depicted within Pixar's Turning Red to be incredibly close to her mother, vying for her approval. But what happens if May is interested in something that her mother disapproves of? Well, we see that when it comes to the quote, sketchy guy at the Daisy Mart. Although May would express disinterest in the beginning of the movie towards this guy, named Devin, through doodling in her notebook she'd become very interested in Devin, like her friends. Unlike in Jimmy Neutron, where the aspect was fairly comical, it was without any serious consequence, wasn't meant to be taken seriously, here, May is very much in serious distress. This is very serious. She's watching her mother blow up a situation with no awareness to how this may affect May's ability to socialize with her peers. Similar to Jimmy Neutron, the dynamic here is quite short as the movie deals with the other problems in May's life, but what makes this one so interesting outside of the recency with this dynamic is that the movie depicts her to grow up in various different aspects, as that's what puberty is. When referencing the concert of popular in-universe band Four Town, she describes the situation as her friends, quote, going off to be women. Naturally, going through puberty, one may be interested in things that previously seemed silly or irrelevant, and you see this through exactly what May focuses on when drawing Devin. She's exploring what she may or may not like in the privacy of her own notebook. To have that ripped from her not only establishes the simmering tension between May and her mother Ming, but it also introduces an added layer of mixed feelings as now May struggles between the approval of her mother and the other urges she may have. It's an excellent way to introduce the weakening foundation between the two and how it's only been holding up because of May's obedience to her mom, rather than out of a genuine amount of openness and trust. But what would this dynamic look like if it were a bigger aspect of the whole story, such as a running joke? The first dynamic discussed within the Loud House was Clyde, who was 11 at the time, and Lori, who was 17 at the time, which Lincoln knows about. Immediately in the first episode, we are shown that when Clyde asks Lincoln if Lori would date younger men, Lori acknowledges the question.
Is your sister ready to date younger men?
Never gonna happen.
Was that your sister? Red alert, overload, overload.
So not only is this a dynamic in which the older person is aware of the crush, but it is a larger part of this show. Within the Loud House, Clyde's affection for Lori has been treated like a running gag out of universe. In universe, it's treated as a weird quirk of his, especially given that he, alongside everyone else, is aware that Lori is romantically with Bobby. One of the biggest aspects is that anytime Clyde gets around Lori, he gets overstimulated, which causes his nose to bleed and even for him to faint. It allows for their conversations to be cut short, to not deal with the situation but still have it for comedy. The show hasn't shied away from showing the depths to which Clyde shows his affection for Lori. Within Get the Message, Clyde was shown to appreciate Lincoln's stepped-on gaming glasses purely because it was Lori who stepped on them. Within the episode Not Allowed, Clyde sees baby photos of Lori and claims that she's been perfect since day one. Within Making the Case, Lincoln, in an attempt to win an upcoming video contest, records his sister's most embarrassing moments, which includes multiple scenes of, I can't believe I'm about to read this, but Lori farting, to which Clyde appreciates them?
Lori's toots. It's like music to my ears.
So how does this show prevent a dynamic like this from being too weird? Well, there's two different aspects as to how. The show makes the dynamic as comedic as it possibly can, which may help with how it's perceived. Within the episode Cheater by the Dozen, when Lincoln and Clyde suspect Bobby of cheating, Clyde spends most of the episode trying to get fit to beat up Bobby in Lori's honor, which doesn't work. However, I think one of the funniest examples is within Save the Date, where during the double date between Lori and Bobby and Lincoln and Ronnie Ann, Clyde dresses up as a waiter to make sure that the dating experience for Bobby is as inconvenient as possible.
Wow, table blankets? Pretty romantic.
I know, isn't it?
I mean, whatever. It's fine. Hey, thanks, man. Oh, hey, wait!
Honestly, the sheer disrespect Clyde gives to Bobby, who's mostly oblivious to it all, really makes the dynamic work. But the more important aspect is how the older person views this dynamic and how they respond to it. Unlike Frankie, who was oblivious, and Judy, who was silently horrified, and even Devin, who didn't get a chance to react, Lori is often shown to be at most minorly inconvenienced at the notion, but not always. Sometimes she rolls with it, like in Affair to Remember, in which he takes Clyde to a fair to make Bobby jealous, as Bobby started hanging out with Lincoln more, comparing it to the brother he's never had. However, Clyde is practically unconscious throughout this entire ordeal, which conveniently gets past the obstacle of having them on a proper date, while using his overstimulation in a logical way. So how do they resolve this dynamic if Lori knows about it? Well, that's explained in Change of Heart. We see that Lori is getting very fed up with Clyde's messy overstimulation around her, causing her to get new shoes anytime that he's around her. Lincoln spends an entire day alongside Lenny helping Clyde to get over Lori. However, in the process, Lenny and Clyde actually spend some quality time together. While Lori is at first celebratory of this, given that Lenny has the burden of Clyde's romance now, she remembers all of the nice things he did for her to show how much he cared for her.
You may have lost your golf tournament, but you'll never lose my heart.
I love you forever. I love you forever.
This leads into Lori oddly wanting that dynamic back, going out of her way to impress Clyde, with Clyde using these times to demonstrate that he can act normal, almost unbothered by her presence. To her, she views this as Clyde being over her, but to him, he views it as barely being able to contain how he feels about her. Lori goes out of her way to show Clyde how she feels now, wearing his gifts, offering him a comic, and even dressing up as Lenny, given that Clyde was spending a lot of time around Lenny, literally bending over backwards to get his attention. Her sisters confront her on this and even call her out for her past behavior.
Why do you even care?
Yeah, you hide when he comes over and throw his gifts in the trash.
Do you like Clyde now?
Of course not.
Well, then why are you trying to win him back?
I just need him to like me. Now, stop asking questions. I know what I'm doing.
This shows that Lori is kind of irrational, but it is logical for her character. Whenever she's with Bobby, she latches onto his attention and even demands more of it in comically unreasonable ways. Naturally, while she doesn't reciprocate Clyde's affection to a T, this is all purely platonic on her end, it was clear that this episode is showing that she does appreciate it now that she's taking the time to reflect on everything that he's done.
First, I wanted to apologize for never appreciating how kind and thoughtful you are. And second, I want to thank you for making me feel so good about myself all these years. You're a special guy, Clyde, and literally anyone would be lucky to be your crush.
Although this leads into Lori seeing Clyde as less of a nuisance and more of a friend, this is a soft ending to their dynamic. They are still seen together afterwards, but the writing has shifted away from this dynamic. However, this next show had a different way of ending that dynamic, which was a lot more interesting. Dipper pines, which showcases crush on fellow part-time worker Wendy Corduroy. Within Double Dipper, Mabel pushes Dipper to simply speak to Wendy naturally, but he insists on having a set plan. Because Wendy is not a predictable robot, she introduces unexpected elements into the night, such as leaving the ticket stand to dance on the main floor, bringing another guy to the party, and also not being on the dance floor all of the time. This leads into Dipper creating clones with the magical copy machine Grunkle Stan has. And what's important to remember is that while Dipper is trying to take account for every random variable, Wendy is having a good time, going with the flow. Unlike every dynamic up to this point, they do bring up the age gap.
You think we really even have a chance with Wendy? I mean, she's 15, we're 12. I don't know, man. I hope so, but we're making zero progress the way we're doing it.
While it's in the air how Wendy feels about this, we do know that she feels very comfortable around Robbie, who'll become more acquainted with Dipper in Fight Fighters. Wendy has to go on vacation, leaving Robbie and Dipper to finally meet, but it goes horribly.
It's obvious you've got a thing for my girlfriend, don't you? Don't you?
What? No, come on, man.
Yeah, I'm sure she's just dying to ask out a 12-year-old kid who wears the exact same shorts every day.
Robbie also brings up the age gap, making it clear that Dipper is a kid and far out of his league. A fight between the two is scheduled for later, and Dipper brings along a very violent backup that nearly destroys Robbie. It's clear that Dipper doesn't feel that Robbie is the best person for Wendy, but that's not just because of Robbie's clear, arrogant, and insecure attitude, but also because he personally is jealous of the attention that Wendy gives to Robbie. It makes this feel both logical but also emotionally driven. They make a pact to hate each other from a distance in fear of losing Wendy, as Wendy hates it when guys fight. We see this simmer over Summerween, where although the majority of the episode revolves around trick-or-treating, or dying, Dipper shows his first time attempting to ditch Mabel in pursuit of Wendy. Although Dipper and Mabel have been trick-or-treating since they were young, because Robbie and Wendy saw it as kind of lame given that they're older, Dipper would not only try to lie his way out of trick-or-treating, but hide the fact that he'd eventually go on to do it from Wendy, leaving Mabel very hurt.
If it wasn't for this crazy monster, you were gonna ditch me on our favorite holiday! What happened to the Dipper who used to love Halloween?
While Mabel was hurt, she'd somewhat get her vengeance within the deep end when she meets a merman who needs to be transported from a pool to the outer aquatic world. Dipper in the meantime becomes an assistant lifeguard, not because of his love for safety, but because he'd get to work alongside Wendy, and by work, they really just goof off and break rules. What's interesting is that this episode confirms that Dipper deep down knows some aspects about his crush with Wendy makes it appear unlikely to work out.
Don't you know what it's like to fall for someone, even though you know in your heart that it'll probably never work out, but you do anything for that person?
He would believe things to not work out until he hears the magic words and boy's crazy.
Look, Robbie, I'm not sure this relationship's working. Maybe I should see other people.
This is until Robbie plays a special song that appears to have brainwashed Wendy into forgiving him for standing her up. When Dipper points this out, Wendy finally ends things with Robbie, but Dipper makes the fatal error of thinking a decision like this wouldn't leave Wendy hurt, immediately asking her to hang out with him instead, leaving Wendy to not want to be around anyone. The fatal error he's made is that he's been treating Wendy as a prize rather than a person. To him, Robbie is a loser, and even to the viewer, Robbie is a loser. Maybe, but to Wendy, she actually cared for that loser, and that's why Dipper overstepped his boundaries in the pursuit of chasing a girl above his age and maturity level. This would come to a height within Into the Bunker, where Dipper would finally verbally admit his feelings. How did Wendy react to the news? Well, before we get there, it's important to note that the episode starts out with Robbie still not over Wendy, and Dipper inquiring if Wendy is seeing anyone else, to which he jokingly admits to seeing a teddy bear. Dipper would continue to push down his feelings for Wendy, even trying to get Mabel to let it go, but she'd end up locking them in a deceptively small closet in an attempt to force Dipper to say it. The closet leads to a secret lab, where a shapeshifter in an attempt to escape nearly does so, but was stopped by Wendy, and lots of water, to which Dipper, not knowing that this Wendy that he sees is actually a fake, finally admits his feelings out loud.
If I had told you when we were in the closet, we wouldn't be in this mess. But I was too scared, and now you could be hurt or worse, and I never even got a chance to tell you. I'm like, in love with you, Wendy.
Dipper?
Wendy would hear everything and they'd finally have the conversation once they're out of the secret lab, stating the obvious that Wendy is too old for Dipper.
I'm, like, super flattered, but I'm too old for you. I mean, you know that, right? Let me tell you something. This summer was super boring until you showed up. I have more fun with you than, like, practically anybody else.
So things won't be too awkward now?
I just wrestled myself, dude. That was awkward.
They do remain friends because Wendy expresses a ton of appreciation for making her summer fun. It's clear that nothing bigger was going to happen between these two, but what if there was a dynamic where they actually did get together? Ferb Fletcher isn't known for saying much, but his silence spoke 1,000 words within the season 1 episode, I Scream, You Scream, where after being sent to pick up the blueprints for a Sunday machine, gets so enamored with the looks of a girl who we would later learn is Vanessa Doofenshmirtz. Phineas even calls him out, as usually he's focused and not known to make mistakes like that.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Ferb, snap out of it. What happened back there?
I was weak.
We'd establish a slow burn with this dynamic, as they naturally wouldn't see each other, and Ferb isn't exactly obsessed with her. We see within Doofania that Candace accidentally wears Vanessa's clothes, and the writing doesn't indicate that Ferb either remembers or has an attachment to who originally wore that outfit, at least for now. He appears to be very interested in her as a person, as very briefly within the Chronicles of Meep, when Ferb is testing out the spaceship he built for Meep, an alien, he meets with Vanessa, who is impressed with him, or at least his ride. What is more concrete is their first substantial appearances together within Vanessary Roughness. We establish early on that Doof really does care for Vanessa and wants to protect her from people.
Hey sweetheart, how'd you like to take a ride on a real bike? She's 16!
However, she does want to gain her independence and wants to prove so via getting Doof a special element he's been looking for. Throughout the episode, Ferb tries to help Vanessa, who insists on doing it herself, which is logical as she doesn't know Ferb, but more importantly is trying to prove her independence. Their interactions aren't hostile, however, and it seems that Ferb for the most part keeps his space, not stepping in unless Vanessa's well-being is at risk. While she does get the element, it was Ferb saving her from being shredded that she thanks him for, with the kiss on the cheek. However, things get addressed even better within Phineas and Ferb, Summer Belongs to You. While the special is about having the longest day ever, there were several dynamics addressed, from Phineas and Isabella, Candace and Jeremy, but also Ferb and Vanessa. It appears the two are on friendly terms, as Vanessa gets coincidentally picked up by Phineas and Ferb, the latter acknowledging them directly.
No! Vanessa! No! Oh, they caught her! They caught her!
Ferb? Vanessa?
No matter where we go, Ferb knows everyone.
Angry at her father for bringing work on what was supposed to be a father-daughter outing, she ditches him and vents to Ferb about it. To trust Ferb on such a level does seem a bit fast, but when you take into consideration that he saved her life, it does make sense to be on that level. He gives her advice that she ends up using, but before he can make his move, Doof shows up to take her back home. Phineas, ironically avoiding his own love arc, even points out to Ferb that if there was any place to showcase your feelings, it should have been the City of Love.
Where's Vanessa?
She went off with someone else.
That's too bad. I thought the two of you, you know, a boy, a girl, alone in the City of Love, I thought romance was a foregone conclusion. Isabella, did you say something?
Just at the point where things get the most interesting, we get a lot of episodes with no more development but feature Vanessa. Episodes like Brain Drain, Candace Disconnected, A Real Boy, and Skittily Whiffers focus more on her rocky relationship with her father, who does genuinely care about her but also cares about being evil, something that she doesn't care very much for. This allows for us to get more development with Vanessa, making her more likable, thus building the demand to see her dynamic with Ferb, but it comes with a cost. Within the episode Minor Monogram, Vanessa speaks about being over bad boys, as apparently one has prioritized silly things over her. This is even confirmed when an intern for Doofenshmirtz within this episode, Rodrigo, backstabs him and offers Vanessa to be at his side.
Join me, Vanessa, and together we will take over the world.
Join you? I don't work for him. That's my father, you dweeb.
Well, yeah, I just thought we had a moment.
A moment. Yeah, I know. What a dip, right?
While she doesn't care much for Rodrigo, she does take a small fancy to the person who defeats him, Monty Monogram. Monty Monogram is the son of Major Monogram, Perry's boss. And when Perry finds out, he panics because he's aware of the conflict of interest this may cause. For one, Ferb likes Vanessa, and Perry may know this. However, more importantly, Monty and Vanessa dating would be worrisome for their fathers, who hate each other. This is brought up within Sipping with the Enemy. However, as sour as their date appeared, they continued to date all throughout season 4. This is the most unique way I've ever seen this dynamic done for one reason. Unlike every other show or movie, Ferb and Vanessa are actually shown to get together, and the way they approach it is out of left field. Within the episode Act Your Age, the special revolves around an older version of Phineas and an older version of Isabella finally being on the same page about their feelings, moments before she goes away for college. The episode doesn't have much to do with Ferb, but towards the end he is shown in a car with Vanessa being very close.
Hey Ferbs, you ready? Hi, Phineas.
Hi, Nessa. Where are you guys going?
Oh, Ferb's taking me out for Ukrainian food.
Of every dynamic within this video, this is the only one where it works out simply because the younger person grew to be an adult and the age gap didn't matter as much. Also because there is very little build towards the dynamic within the last season, given Vanessa's direction with Monty and a relationship with their father, it comes as a surprise, if not fan service for the community to have a proper close. The most surprising aspect about all of these dynamics is that their presence within all of these shows are not desirable. And I think that's the right thing. While each of these dynamics were presented well and appropriately, at the same time, I don't care for them. If they were removed from the show, I wouldn't miss them, and it wouldn't be the straw that breaks the camel's back for me to not watch the show. And because no show has this built into the selling point, it allows for it to flourish without seeming weird to push within children's media, despite it being a very natural and normal thing to occur. But what do you think? Thanks for watching.